Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Intuitive Life Coach. Okay, that was crazy. Anyways, welcome back. And this is your host, Angie, coming at you this evening. I've been getting like so many intuitive hits lately. It has been like a roller coaster. So here's a little insight about growing in your spirituality. You're going to have ebb and flows. You're going to have times where you're like super connected and hearing from your guides. And then you're going to have times where you don't. And I have had both. I've had many ebb and flows in the last several years, but I remember, gosh, it's probably a year ago, like I was just like on a fast track, like getting all kinds of messages, having visions, connection with my guides. They were just saying all this stuff to me. My dad was coming back to visit me in spirit and saying things to me, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. And I kept like trying to dig in and connect, and it was just like silence. And I remember I booked a session with another psychic medium, like a mentoring session, and I asked her, I was like, what, like, am I doing something wrong? Like, I'm having a really hard time connecting with my guides right now. And she said, well, this is just part of the process of growing, because it's like you learn and then you put it into practice, and then you learn and then you put it into practice. So they're stepping back a little bit, allowing you to begin to implement the things that you have been taught in your spirit and in your intuition. And so that was when I really started to be less afraid of my giftings and started to share them a little bit more with the world, and realized that what was happening was I was in a place of like hiding myself pretty, like I didn't want anybody to know about stuff that, like these abilities or whatever. And so the more I started to come out about it, the more they started to open again. But I've had more of those times of quiet in the recent year, and I am a lot more patient with those times than I was like 2 years ago or however long ago it was. So if you're going through ebb and flows where you're like really connected in your spirit, your intuition is like really strong, and you're like connected with your guides or loved ones, or, you know, if you do mediumship or whatever, and then you go through a period of where things are just quiet, just allow that time to happen. Everybody's not the same either. So there's going to be people that are way more connected all the time. But I think that what is important is that our higher self knows when we're ready to receive things in our spirit and begin to embody it into our ego and to live it out. And when there's a lot of fear, or when there's rejection, or there's things hidden deep inside of us that we are healing from and that we're not really aware of, maybe sometimes, I think what can happen is that like our guides and our spirit is still connected and communicating with the higher realm, or, you know, the other energies out there in the spirit. But our ego might be going through a pruning process of releasing some trauma, and therefore that's kind of becomes like the need in the moment. So it's not that we're not still getting messages, or we're not still connecting. We're just hearing them in a different way, and we interpret them in a different way. Like I think about how I don't remember how many months ago, I know I made some episodes on this, but how when I went through like a really, really, really deep healing for some of the sexual abuse I went through, and I was having like suddenly somatic flashbacks in my body, that was insane, you guys. I did not realize that my body was having flashbacks basically all my life. But when it started to happen, when I had like a actual like visual flashback, and then my body just reacted, and it was like nothing. I couldn't get out of it. It was just like flashback. Anything was triggering. My body was just like in a state of shock, I guess. And so I'd allow myself to move through that, and it was not easy. But I did notice that during that time, like, I really felt this piece of like, this is happening for a reason, to expose what needs to be healed. Because if you are a victim of abuse of any kind, really, especially sexual, you may have went through a dissociation if it was a constant thing in your life, and you may not remember a single thing. And there's like huge blocks in my childhood I do not remember at all. And suddenly these things are coming back to me, and I'm starting to remember things. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. That's why this bothers me. And this is why I think like this. And this is why this happens. And it's like puzzle pieces being put together. And it helps me to heal a little bit more, because it makes me not feel so crazy to know that actually these things are real and my triggers are real. So I just want to share that with you tonight. Just if you are, or today, whenever you listen to this, if you're in a moment of like a ebb and flow where you're just kind of like lost on what to do next, just be patient. You'll get through it. Just keep connecting, keep asking, keep being still, meditating, and then you'll begin to open up again. But don't press or don't push away any of those triggers that are coming up, because it's actually likely your guides exposing those to you so you can release them. So I want to share a little bit more like along that topic tonight or today. I'm recording at night, but you may listen to it another time. But I want to talk about rejection and how we often respond to rejection, especially when we are a victim of any kind of abuse, or if we have been in a relationship with a narcissist, whether that is with a parent or in a romantic relationship or anything like that. There's a healing aspect that needs to happen as far as rejection. So I'll share a little bit of my own personal story, and then a lot of women I work with struggle with this as too. But what happens is your brain goes into these trauma responses, and to fight, flight, fawn, and like, my mind is not thinking of the other one, but, the one I really want to focus on is, never mind. Is the fawning one, because what happens is like we begin to make other people more important than ourselves. And when we start to put other people in the place of kind of like where we find our value, or where we feel okay with ourselves, we begin to cause energetic cords between us and other people that can be very, they may be really good for a while, like when you first start a relationship with somebody. And then it seems to go foggy, and things start to be harder, and communication gets harder, and there might be a like weird feeling between you and another person. And what is happening is there's an energetic shift going on, and the attachment that is being formed with this other being who is also energy is causing a conflict in being able to really, truly, vulnerably connect on a level that is not requiring anything in return, I guess. And so this is why I really focus on teaching learning to love yourself. Because without the love of yourself, you are constantly going to be seeking that out in another way. Whether you are numbing and eating or drinking or engaging in any kind of drugs or anything, like exercise is a way to numb too, or just vegging out, whatever. That numbing aspect keeps us from having to feel those feelings. And then if we are just going from relationship to relationship, trying to find our, we're trying to find self-love is what we're trying to do, but we're looking for it in other people and things. And so what ends up happening is energetically, this fog basically comes up energetically between you and another human and in their spirit, because it's not actually flowing in love. It is, it's flowing more so in a pulling, I guess, a pulling from the other energy, which can be draining. So what can happen is we will go through what we fear the most, and it will be rejection. This other person will reject us. And what happens is we begin to go inward and become the victim of this. And it may take us a while to move through this. And if you are able to get through this, you may latch onto another relationship really quickly. If you, for myself, it takes me a really long time to get into a friendship or relationship. But once I feel like I can trust somebody, what had been my pattern before I started to heal was I would be very connected and latch onto these people, like in fear that they would leave me. And what I didn't understand at the time was in my own energy, I was actually creating the energetic alignment for the rejection to happen. So by me placing the fear of the rejection between me and this other being, this spirit and this human, I was actually manifesting my rejection. And then when it would happen, I would go into this, I told you so. I knew that was going to happen. Now, there wasn't necessarily any like bad things that happened in these relationships. It wasn't anything like, I wouldn't say, of course there's always a different perspective. But there wasn't like hurt words or, and so I will say there are probably definitely some relationships that happened in, but most of them were more of a like kind of clash in expectations, I guess. And so when that rejection happened, what would happen in my energy is I began to reject myself. And it was almost like a punishment to myself for the rejection. And I would go into this like, I knew this was going to happen. I told them they were going to leave me, and then here they are. And it's almost like this victim mentality of like, this always happens and it's always going to happen. And that causes even more energy to absorb into us. And then without really getting to the source, we are unable to clear it and develop healthy relationship. And so what we have to do when we begin to heal this, what we have to be really mindful of is that this is actually trauma responses. These are not who we really are. And we begin to create a story around these things based on our feelings, based on what happens, and we embody them as who we are. However, that is not true. What is true is that we are actually energetic beings that are connected with the divine energy, with the universal energy, who is able to flow and be at peace and have self-love. And in that space, there is no lack. There's no need to attach or place expectations on another person or a thing. we begin to move into the understanding that there are just no other energies that we connect with, and that the flow of love is actually coming from the actual true source of energy that we are made of. And so it becomes easier to flow in relationships. And then in that space, we can begin to release the story that we have created around what we have believed to be about ourselves. But to do that, we actually have to begin to expose areas in our life that have created that energy. And that requires sometimes going in and doing some healing and trauma work, facing the truth of things that have happened in your life. Maybe it wasn't like something that you consider to be significant trauma, but it was something that impacted you enough that it caused you pain in some way. This is a horrible story. But I heard this last night as I was listening. I do all kinds of studying, and I'm always, doing classes and all kinds of stuff. And this man said that he was doing some healing work with a woman, and she was having a lot of hip pain. Well, this woman actually didn't have trauma in her childhood, but when he was going through her body, he picked up trauma. And her mom had been in the same room, and so he asked, do you know what this could be? And her mom got really pale and shocked that this was coming up. And she said, yeah, I do. When she was a baby, I used cloth diapers. And when I pinned a cloth on her, I did not know I had actually pinned her skin to it as well. And she was like that overnight. And I didn't understand why she was crying and, going through all this. And then the next day I discovered that she had been in pain the whole time. And so if you think about the energetic bondage that happened in that time of fear, and then feeling neglected, in having pain and not being seen and not having relationship, it was just one night of her life, and that impacted her for a lifetime, where she had this pain in her body, where she remembered this trauma. Her body remembered the trauma. Of course, she didn't remember it. She was just basically a newborn. And so when this was discovered, they were able to do some energetic releasing and release the trauma. And that helped this area in her body to begin to heal. So what we have to realize sometimes is that sometimes we have these aches and pains in our bodies. For example, for myself, I have hip pain. I have a hip that goes out of place sometimes. I have lower back pain. I have since a very, very young age, I always had stomach issues. And then I ended up developing endometriosis, and I had to have a hysterectomy in my 30s. And so based on the trauma that I experienced in early childhood, from birth all the way through, up into my 20s, basically, it is no wonder I have pain in that area. And so the other night I was in bed and I was having horrible hip pain. I couldn't even move in my bed to get comfortable. And it just sometimes I forget that this can be connected to trauma or an energy. And so that night I just happened, I believe my guides probably were like, this is trauma related. You've been doing a lot of healing, so you need to release that energy. And so I'm a Reiki master. So I spent some time doing Reiki on my hips and my legs and in my back. And sure enough, the pain released and I was able to go to sleep. But I realized that the pain was related to some of the healing work I had been doing in therapy, with really going inward to my childhood and seeing some of the sexual abuse that I've been through. And I hadn't fully released that. And I still have a lot of it I'm digging out of, but I am learning to be really patient with myself and allow that to move through my body. And we all might have, you may have this pain and you're like, well, I don't know where this comes from. And the first thing we do is we run to a doctor and we want the doctor to fix us. And they're like, well, we can't find anything wrong with you. Well, that's because it's an energy. It's an actual energy in your body. It's an actual trauma in your body that needs to be healed through your mind. The doctor's not going to pick up trauma. The doctor can do an MRI and an X-ray and find a broken hip or a broken, whatever in your body or a cyst or whatever, or the endometriosis. But they're not going to be able to connect it back to a trauma you went through in your life. And so this is what happens when we begin to go through this healing process, is we begin to become more aware of the attachments that we have in our lives and how we form relationships and how we show up for ourselves and other people. And these expectations that we create around our relationships and on ourselves actually causes more discord within our body and the other person's body. And we begin to have very low density, foggy energy between two people. And then when you come back, when a rejection happens or you get hurt again, that story comes back from how you felt in the beginning when this thing happened to you, and you embody that story and you begin to reject yourself. So in the healing process, learning to not reject yourself and begin to really dive into that part of your healing is going to help you release these things, where you can begin to form healthy relationships with people without the expectation of them filling a void in your mind or body in any way, whether you had been aware of that or not. So this is super deep stuff, and I know that it can be kind of overwhelming to think about, like, well, how do I know this is going on, or how do I know that? Well, that's where the healing work comes in. That's when you have to get really in touch with your intuition and allow your guides to take you through this. And if you want to do therapy, like I've said before, find yourself a hypnotherapist or an EMDR therapist. But I will tell you, and I write about this in my book, you have to find somebody you trust. You have to find somebody that you feel vulnerable, you can be vulnerable with. Because I will tell you, I have had people in my life that I went to for help in healing. And when it came to sharing the story, when it came to being honest about the story, I would clam up and I wouldn't say anything, because I was so used to pretending I was okay in order to get people to like me, that I was like, well, I'm not going to tell them that. They don't want to know that. Why would they want to know that? And even a therapist, which is so silly. But so when I finally found somebody that I felt safe enough with, I still at times really struggle with feeling safe. But I know that's my, and I'm learning, that's my inner child that pops up and tries to protect me. So calming that part of myself down to heal is very important. But I have to be very kind with myself in those moments and be aware that I can't also reject myself in the now. And so those expectations need to be released so that I can begin to fill the void in my own heart, in my own mind, and in my own body. Because nobody else can do that. Nobody can. Only you can do that. So if you are going through cycles of this and you just are not sure what's happening, maybe this is it. And again, I'm just going to say, if you need extra help, or if you would like to be coached through this, or, work with me for 6 weeks to 3 months or 6 months or whatever you want to do, is a great starting point, even before you jump into deeper healing. If you want to just touch the surface with me, you got to start somewhere, because it can be intimidating to jump full in and do this work. But I promise you, when you start, you will begin to free yourself. And those attachments and the negative attachments, the fear, the rejection, the conflicts, they will begin to calm down. And you will begin to feel even more safe in your body. And you'll be amazed at how your relationships will begin to develop outside of that need to fill that void that you didn't even know you were trying to fill. So again, reach out if you would like some support. And I hope this was helpful for you as you are moving through your journey. So I wish you all the best day, night, evening, whatever time it is for you when you listen to this. I send you all the universal love that there is. Namaste.